We continue our series. These are written that you may believe, and today is part 30. And we're coming to the section of this series where Jesus dealt with death. You will see some cases of returning back to life, or how scientists saying about that resuscitation. They do not call it resurrection because resurrection will come during the last days. But what Jesus practiced, he restored people back to life. And in today's case we will see how he restored back to life a young girl who was 12. So part 30, and I call it holding the hand of Jesus. As you remember, he held the girl by the hand and he restored her back to life. And Psalm 37 verses 23 and 24, they also speak about God's hand. So God's hand is a big idea in today's message. The Lord directs the steps of the godly. He delights in every detail of their lives. We see that those people who are godly, they get that direction from God, and he helps them to keep right direction of their moving. And who those people who are godly? From Hebrew, those people who get strength, or who receive strength from the Lord, or who confirmed a covenant with him. So those people who are in covenant with God, they get strength from the Lord, and by this strength they are able to keep direction of their moves in their lives. So also it says that he delights in every detail of their lives. God is really involved into our lives, and he finds delight when we are following his rules or his directions, when we are in close relationship with him. And of course, as human beings on this earth, we do stumble. And Psalm also says, though they stumble, they will never fall, for the Lord holds them by the hand. So this connection with him, by holding his hand, helps us to not fall and persevere. And also, word directs is interesting too. It says the Lord directs the steps of the godly, which means people who are in covenant with him. They are fixed, they are established, or they are securely determined in what they do and what they want to reach. And he directs them toward absolutely perfect moral senses, or morality, or ethical side of his guidance is very important to him. So as a human beings, we can be subjects of corruption when our morality perverts. What is good we do not do, but what is bad we have tendency to cling to that. And God helps us to sustain, to persevere, and to be directed properly in a moral sense. And our story today, as I said, about restoring back to life a young girl. But first it starts, maybe you never really kept attention on the connection between his dialogue about patch of unshrunk cloth, or new wine and old wineskins, and the case of resuscitation back to life of young girl, but it is really connected. Please do not allow yourself to be fooled by the chapters or verses. In original text there are no chapters nor verses, so it's like a song without any interruptions. And his speech about a patch of unshrunk cloth or new wine, they are directly connected with the case of restoration young girl back to life. I'll try to explain you a little bit more. So we are in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 9 verses 16 through 22. Jesus said, "No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment." And what he meant by the combination of words, a patch of unshrunk cloth, is he talked that no one connects new with something which has been worn by use, or with something which had been abused by inappropriate use or inappropriate fellowship or inappropriate social interactions. That's what he said. That's what he meant. No one attaches new to something which had been worn. Why? Because the patch, something which is new, will pull away from the garment making the tear worse. Also, if you can imagine a patch and a garment, you will see difference between it, right? Patch is a smaller garment, is bigger garment, is combination of sleeves and other parts of the cloth. But patch, it is a small piece of material. But also under that, what Jesus meant, a garment, it is combination of ideas which expressed by words as a teaching. Also, garment can represent something which is covered or connected by the blood. And we speak here about covenant. It is a little bit theological view on what Jesus spoke. But people who listened to him, they were trained properly. They knew that they've got many covenants with the Lord and they have to keep them. But by their corruption, by their perversion, by their rebellion and their foolishness, they abused perfect system of the fellowship with God, which God himself gave to people. So it was corrupted, it was worn by abuse of humans. And Jesus himself was as a new patch of unshrunk cloth. He came to this world to bring new amount of mercy, new amount of fullness. And he said that before coming in relationship with me, you have to fix something. Actually, he came to fix us. He came to establish us in order to be in connection with this new patch of unshrunk cloth. And he said, if people will attach this new patch of unshrunk cloth, it will make the tear worse. So garment, the system can be ruined, can be collapsed. It creates conflict. When you attach new wine or new beginning to something which had been worn by use, it creates conflict. It actually increases the gap. It is not comfortable. It is not comforting. It is not nice. It disturbs. It is painful. Nakedness can appear. When garment is teared down, what happens? Nakedness appears. And do you remember I told you already that nakedness and crookedness, corruption, have same root in Hebrew. So what Jesus meant, when new beginning comes to our lives, sometimes this new beginning can uncover something which is not nice, which is not comfortable to be exposed. That's what he meant under something which teared worse and worse. And verse 17, neither do people pour new wine into old wineskins. And again, new wine, it is a liquid, and old wineskins, it is a combination of materials which had been constructed or made before. If they do, and some people do, the skins will burst, the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. That's exactly what he meant. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved. So what Jesus wanted, he wanted for us to be preserved in eternity. As we say, he wanted for us to be saved. To be saved means to be preserved in eternity in a proper place with God. And verse 18, while he was saying this, do you see combination between his dialogue, his explanation of old wineskins, new wine, new patch, and visit of the ruler of the synagogue? He knew that the ruler of the synagogue will come with his request. He knew that. Jesus has perfect knowledge of any events. And before the visit of the ruler of synagogue, he explained to people that someone who is a representative of the worn system, of the worn by abuse religious system, will come with a request of my involvement into healing or into restoration to life. Someone who is precious to that man. So the member of the religious society which had been worn by abuse will come in connection with me. That's exactly what happened in verse 18. While he was saying this, a synagogue leader came and knelt before him. And you know what it means when a synagogue leader comes publicly and kneels before Jesus? What about his comrades? What about his colleagues in the synagogue? Do you know that they've had agreement that anyone who will get in connection with Jesus will be expelled from the synagogues and from the society? So he didn't care about his former comrades or real comrades' attitude. He just was desperately needed someone's help, and this someone is a great and mighty Messiah, Christ. Or as we can also say, great and mighty God who came, who appeared in the flesh and bones before people. And he knelt before Jesus and said, "My daughter has just died. But come and put your hand on her and she will live." So what you can say about this tremendous example of someone who relied on Jesus so greatly? What you can say about this man?
He was desperate for his daughter.
Yeah, but also what he has had inside of him. Faith, great faith. He says publicly, "My daughter has just died." But do you see the difference between believers and non-believers? Both are connected with reality. What we can see, what we can experience, what we know, right? And in this reality, his daughter died. But difference between believers and unbelievers. Believers always have but. Yes, it's like a line which separates darkness and light. Those who are in the light side, they always have this but. Come. Which means, yes, I know that my daughter is dead, but I also know that you are able to help me. Just come and put your hand on her. Just get your connection. Just put your new patch of unshrunk cloth. Also, word unshrunk means new or a clothed dresser. Someone who rolls the fabric and makes new garment by it. So just come and roll by your mighty power situation toward the absolutely different end where my daughter will live. Just put your hand on her and she will live. And amazing, verse 19, Jesus even didn't respond on that. He just got up and went with him. And so did his disciples, and disciples followed him. I'm sure they've had some kind, thoughts, why he's coming with him? His daughter is dead. Right? And also, there is a small glimpse of the story in between. We see like another story inside of this story. And this story is about healing of a woman who was suffering for 12 years. In verse 20 we read, just then, a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak. Have you ever thought why those words are here, just then? Which means that there is some kind of connection. There is some kind of connection between appearance of this ruler of the synagogue, between agreement of Jesus to follow him to his house, and appearance of this woman. Do you see connection, how God attaches one patch of unshrunk cloth to another patch of unshrunk cloth to another patch? There are several parts of something which is new, which is totally new in those people's lives, but this new had been attached to their lives because of God's will and because of their readiness to meet this new. They've been old wine skins. In some sense, we all are, wine skins. We all have skin, right? But it's up to us what kind of skins we are, old wine skins or new wine skins. By God's intervention, by God's connection with us, and by our willingness and openness, we can be transformed from old wineskins into new wineskins. And then this new patch of unshrunk cloth, instead of tearing us down, will build something. We will be established by our readiness to meet Jesus' involvement and by our openness. Like in those people's cases. Great example of a synagogue leader. And now we see a woman. Difference between synagogue leader and a woman. What kind of difference? Who is a synagogue leader? He is a public figure, right? We could say he even a politician. He is involved into many people's lives, and he always on a surface. He is always on a scene. And who is that woman? She is nobody. She is nobody. First of all, because she is unclean. She is not only a woman, which is in Israel. Actually, I want to tell you that Israel was much more advanced than many other countries. Women in Israel, they were much more higher in their social status than in many other countries. But still, in public appearance, women have to follow certain rules. First of all, they should not touch unknown men. That was absolute taboo, absolutely prohibited. Secondly, she had those bleedings, and according to Torah, according requirements, when, and not only women, anyone, men or women, when they have bleedings, they have to stay away from people because they are considered unclean. She stepped over those prohibitions because she has been in desperate situation. Do you see what is happening? When we are desperate, we are ready to step over. When we are desperate, we becoming a new wine skins. You know why? Because when we are not desperate, we are still corrupted by our false self-sufficiency, and we are not ready for the new patch of unshrunk cloth. Because if we will get in connection with this patch, we will be teared down, we will be demolished. But when we are desperate, when we are humbled, we are ready for this patch. And this patch, instead of demolishing us, builds us up. She had been a subject to bleeding for 12 years. We read that in verse 20. She came up behind Jesus. I already talked about this with you. And touched the edge of his cloak. Some saying that she touched tzitzit. Tzitzit was a special commandment from God. Certain threads, combination of threads, and she grabbed that. And tzitzit, or those threads, represent commandments. So she grabbed the corner of his cloak, and she said to herself, and again we've talked about you with that in verse 20, she came behind him. Why behind him? Because she could not appear in front of him. She was an outcast. She was a figure of the shadows. She dwelt in the shadows because of the situation. But Jesus came to bring light to those who are in the shadows of their lives. He came up to raise up people of the shadows and to lower people of the public appearance. He came to make smooth the road. And in verse 21, she said to herself, it is very important actually to talk with ourselves. There are cases when we have to talk with ourselves. We have to reason with our humanness, because our humanness is at war with our faith. So we have to reason with our humanness, and that's exactly what she has done to herself. She said to herself, if I only touch his cloak, I will be healed. Why she said that to herself? Because something in herself said, are you stupid? Who told you that you will be healed when you will touch his cloak? But she said, no, I will do that. So she dealt properly with herself, with her logic, with her humanness. Verse 22, Jesus turned and saw her. Take heart, daughter. So which means be encouraged, be courageous. He said, your faith has healed you. Very interesting. He didn't tell her, my power healed you. He said, your faith has healed you. What it tells to us, that God always preserves something in us toward facing a new patch of unshrunk cloth. It's up to us if we are ready to find it in us, or if we are ready to reason with ourselves in order to face this new patch of unshrunk cloth. Your faith has healed you. he said to her, and the woman was healed at that moment. Also, when we talked about patch of unshrunk cloth, cloth represents something which has divine power, or which has divine quality of life. It's not only physical. When we do have physical connection with Jesus, when we touch Him or He touches us, we get this connection with His power and with His new quality of life. For example, with a release from fear, with a release from loneliness, with a release from rejection. And He has all that divine power and ability to grant it to us if we get connection with Him. In the midst of being worn by abuse, in the midst of being a part of the human society which is worn or which is abused greatly, we still are recipients of the new beginning which is covered or which is empowered or which is qualified totally different, not as we got before. Also, I would like to note that in verse 20 it says that women had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. 12 years are a very important number. 12 years, it is a number when we are becoming sons or daughters of commandments. Sons or daughters of commandments. In our case here, in both situations we have women. One woman is an adult, another woman is a girl, young girl. But both got connection with this age or with this amount of years, 12. For women, it was a period of suffering, 12 years. For girl, it was a point of death at her age of 12. So in both women's lives, they came to that moment of connection with the path of unshrunk cloth, which contained 12 years. In the case with adult woman, she was suffering 12 years. In the case of young girl, she was living for 12 years before she faced death and then restoration. But that's not all. Also, why age of 12 is important? Because according to tradition in Israel, girls becoming a 12, they are called bat mitzvah, which means a daughter of the commandment. And after this age, the boys reach this age at 13 and girls at 12. They have to bear their own responsibility. So they get responsibility, full amount of responsibility for the scriptural, ritual laws, traditions, and ethics or moral standards. Do you see in the case of adult woman, she came to that point through suffering. And as a result, they are able to participate in all areas of Israel's community life. Do you see? At age 12 or 13 for the boys, they get responsibility, but also they get the right of participation. Participation always comes with responsibility. Fellowship with God comes with responsibility. No responsibility, if we're doing what we want, we are not in fellowship with God. In order to get fellowship with God, we have to be responsible for what? We have to be responsible for how we deal with scriptural ritual laws or teachings, with scriptural traditions, and with scriptural moral standards. And you can say, I'm not legalist. I'm under the grace. And I can respond to you. We cannot be free from laws, traditions, or ethic. Do you agree with me? It is not possible for us to be free from the law, from traditions, or from moral standards. It is not possible. As human beings, as members of society, it doesn't matter where we live, we always are subjects of the law, of traditions, or ethical or moral standards. The matter is what kind of law we obey, what kind of traditions we have, and what kind of moral standards we are following. That is why at age 12, girls, and at age 13, boys called daughters or sons of commandments, which speaks about God's commandments. We continue. Now we look through the glasses of Mark. Difference between Matthew and Mark. Matthew, his gospel was written to Jewish community, or at least to people who are in close connection with Torah, with Scripture. Mark wrote his gospel for Greeks, for Hellenistic world. But now we just change glasses. Gospel of Mark, chapter 5, verses 21 through 24, and 35 through 43. Now, when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, do you see the difference between Matthew and Mark? Right from the beginning, same story, but written differently. Do you see? Do you see that Mark put the other side to the other side? Why? Why he placed this to the other side? Because when we are on the other side, we're becoming different. Why Matthew didn't place it? Because it was not necessary to speak about other side to Jewish community. Every one of them knew that Hebrew or Ivri means someone who is already on the other side. But for Greeks, it is necessary to move themselves to the other side. That's what Mark wanted to tell us by describing. Now, when Jesus had crossed over, so we have to cross over. We have to cross over the river, which contains foreign law or foreign teachings, which contains foreign traditions, and which contains foreign moral standards. That's what this river contains. And we have to cross over to the other side, where different laws, different teachings, different traditions, and different standards, moral standards or ethical standards. A great multitude gathered to Jesus, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus. Do you see the difference again between Matthew and Mark? Matthew didn't bring this name, but Mark brings this name, Jairus, which means whom God enlightens. Jairus from Hebrew means whom God enlightens. And we have to turn on our prophetic imagination, prophetic mind, or wear prophetic glasses. We can tell about this ruler. He had been enlightened by God, but by what means? By what price? At the expense of his little daughter. God allowed him to suffer so much when his daughter passed away that he neglected all his, social status, all traditions, all respect from the community, and he knelt before Jesus. Do you see how God enlightened him? Through great sufferings, through great loss. That's what Mark wanted to tell to Greeks, that even this man who was a ruler of the synagogue, but he was blind until great suffering and loss came to his life. And when this great loss came to his life, he was enlightened by name. So his name was, he actually carried this name, but his personality got connection with this name only after the loss and suffering. And when he saw him, Jesus, he fell at his feet and begged Jesus earnestly, saying, "My little daughter lays at the point of death." We see here that she wasn't dead yet when he came to Jesus. "Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed, and she will live." So Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged him. Now, very interesting situation here in verse 35. While he was still speaking, some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house. We just read about great example of faith of the ruler of the synagogue, right? But behind every ruler there is his house, or his family. And if you have great faith, it doesn't mean that all your home ones have same great faith. And even if you have great faith, you will be challenged or tested by the lack of faith of your home ones. That's what this story tells us about. And some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house, who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" So who really spoke to this ruler? Whose voice you see? Huh? The serpent. Satan. So what he says to the ruler, "Why you bother, teacher? Your daughter already dead." Do you understand that? Stop your attempts. Stop your tries. She's already dead. That's it. Which means accept reality. But Jesus immediately helped this man. So when we are tested, when we are challenged by our home ones, we have to rely on Jesus. Jesus would always help us. That's what it means to be established, not to be shaken by doubts, by confrontations of the lack of faith. As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, we see here conflict of the spoken words. They are spoken words of Jesus himself, and they are spoken words of the darkness. And those spoken words, they are at conflict with each other. And conflict sometimes happens here. He said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not be afraid, only believe." Do you see? He helped him to deal with fear. Do not be afraid, only believe. So, how to deal with fear? Through faith. Faith can conquer fear. God is able to help us. Jesus is able to help us to conquer fear. And verse 37, "And he permitted no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James." What we see in verse 37, why Jesus prohibited anyone to follow him? Because they were in doubts. They lived in a world of the physical appearance. They lived by what they saw. And because of that, Jesus prohibited them to be his followers. Do you hear what I'm saying? Jesus prohibits people to follow him when they live by their sight. They have no access to certain points of their lives which they need to have this access. But Jesus prohibits to people to come if they live in doubts, if they live by their logic, by what they see. They have no access. We have to believe in order to get access to most sacred areas of revelation of divine power, like in this case. So he permitted no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And we know that those were the pillars. Peter, James, and John, they were pillars of the church. They were pillars of the family of God. Then he came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue and saw a tumult, which means a loud, confused noise. We have to be wise. We have to be wise. God requires sometimes solitude. God sometimes requires an intimacy, intimate atmosphere of close relationship with Him. It's not always connected with noise. So, and those who wept and wailed loudly, and it is tradition on the Middle East to weep loudly. Actually, you know what I noticed? I watched news yesterday, and I noticed similar noise when people are mourning and when they are rejoicing. There are certain spectrum of the sounds which are similar. And I also noticed that women are heavily involved into that. God created a woman powerfully. Women, by their voice, they can proclaim joy or they can proclaim mourning. And in this case, Jesus didn't want for women to proclaim mourning because it was a time of the new patch of unshrunk clothes to be attached to their lives. When he came in, he said to them, "Why make this commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping. So what he said, do not proclaim loss. She is not lost. She's just sleeping. And what the reaction of people? And they ridiculed him, so they mocked him. They laughed at his words, because those words were absolutely foreign to them. Foreign. They didn't have faith. But when he had put them all outside, he took the father and the mother of the child, which means closest relatives, and those who were with him, and we remember Peter, James, and John, and entered where the child was laying. Then he took the child by the hand and said to her, Talifa kumi, which means, little girl, I say to you, arise. Have you noticed? Very interesting word, arise. He didn't tell her, come back to life or be alive. Arise. There are two words, arise. Arising back, to be fixed up with Jesus. So what he has done with this girl, he gave her new beginning, literally new beginning. She had been established and fixed on Jesus now. And again, she was a member of the house of the ruler of synagogue. So that was pure new beginning for the old worn system, religious system. Immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years of age. Do you see, she became a new daughter of commandments, which were connected with new path. And they were overcome with great amazement, of course. But he commanded them strictly that no one should know it. So why he commanded them about it? Yes, it wasn't time. He didn't want for people to make him a king prematurely, because it was just human desire to place someone on a throne who dealt properly with death. But it wasn't perfect time. Jesus' ultimate victory wasn't in a physical realm of those times. Jesus' ultimate victory was in a spiritual realm. And time didn't come for him to come as a mighty, victorious king. He will come as a mighty, victorious king back to Jerusalem. And we will come to see him, to face him, and to celebrate his victory. But time didn't come yet in this story. He commanded them strictly that no one should know it, and said that something should be given her to eat. So he took care of her body too, of her natural desires, natural needs. And last slide for today, Psalm 63, verse 8, about our souls. My soul clings to you. Your right hand upholds me. So God expects from us. God expects from us that we would cling to Him. And as a result of that, from His side, we will get contact, we will get connection with His hand, which will uphold us, which means sustain us and help us, as I said before, to keep proper moral or ethical direction and proper moral standards. And the word clings, dabak, means to be joined together. So God expects that we will join Him. He expects that we will follow Him closely. He expects that we will stay with Him. And we will be faithful. Actually, we've been created for family relationship with Jesus. Everyone, every human being on this earth had been created to live in close family relationship with Jesus. When we say, I repented in such and such year and such month, what we really say, I came back to my original project, or to my original state of mind, soul, and spirit. I returned to be faithful to God. And of course, it's not us, it's our ancestors, they wandered away from faithfulness to God. But God sent Himself, He sent His Son to us to attach this new patch of unshrunk cloth. But before, this system has to be transformed. These wine skins. For some reason I call it wild skins. Maybe wild skins too. My soul clings to you, your right hand upholds me. May God bless you. Hopefully you've heard something today which helps us to restore what was given to us from the beginning of times. And may God grant you mercy to be flexible for His transformational power and for you to be renewed, to become new wineskins, and then His new wine will grant you new beginning, great resource of power for restoration. And may me and you will be children of commandments, sons and daughters of commandments, who are responsible for His teaching, who are responsible for His traditions, who are responsible for His ethical or moral standards, and who put aside our national, human teachings, traditions, and standards. Amen? If you would like to raise your voice, please do that. There is a prophetic picture in Psalm 118. As I said to you, there are different sounds of mourning and sounds of joy and victory. And in Psalm 118, verses 15 through 16, we read, "Shouts of joy and victory resound in the tents of the righteous." And I just want to remind you that righteous people, those people who made proper adjustment in the area of teaching, traditions, and moral or ethical standards, that's what considered righteousness. The Lord's right hand has done mighty things. The Lord's right hand is lifted high. The Lord's right hand has done mighty things. Because of Lord's might and power and ability, the sound of joy and sound of victory will be heard in the tents of righteous people. And I believe that God brought you here, and the biggest reason why He brought you here, your interest in Him, your desire, somewhere deeply inside of you, you have desire to have close relationship with Him. He knows that and He admires this. And if you rely on Him, He will be helpful wherever you are. And what kind of needs you have, He is able to help. Just as He said to the ruler of synagogue, do not be afraid, just believe. And God will do what you need. He knows the situation much more better than we do. Do you agree with me? May God bless you, and may you will be sounding as His trumpet of joy and victory. And may people will keep asking you, why are you so joyful? What is going on? Why are you not like us? May God bless you. Thank you.